Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathaniel. I particularly love movies, and I want to share that with you. From the horrifying to the terrifying, the spine-chilling to the hair-raising, along with the straight-up disgusting. WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around, and we'll leave you with a movie that will make your blood run cold.
88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. And for tonight's episode, we are going to be kicking off the month of October, the month of horror movies. Here on What to Watch Wednesdays, like I did last year, I decided let's cover only horror movies for the entirety of October. I can get away with it. People love horror movies. People love monster movies. Might as well just dedicate the entirety of the month of October to horror movies and monster-associated things so that we're all kind of getting warmed up for Halloween. Might as well. And tonight, I figured we'd start off nice and simple with kind of horror movies. Movies concerning vampires. A specific trilogy in relation to vampires. And before you ask, no, I am not going to be talking about Twilight tonight. I would rather not talk about Twilight. And so that's what I'm going to choose to do. I'm rather doing anything else. And that's why tonight we are talking about 3 vampire movies featuring a half-vampire, half-human hybrid. He's known as the Daywalker, and he hunts vampires. Sounds interesting, right? Well, tonight's movies are part of the Blade trilogy. The 3 movies we're talking about tonight concern the Marvel character Blade, and start off with Blade from 1998, followed up by Blade 2 from 2002, and ending out with Blade Trinity from 2004. Truly, tonight will be a sort of a warm-up because these movies aren't exactly horror, they're more concerned with a Marvel comic book character. But little do you know, that's exactly where the horror comes from, because I've never talked about Marvel comic book movies here on What to Watch Wednesdays before, and that's truly more evil and horrifying than anything having to do with vampires. So, stick around until after the break, where we'll jump into Blade from 1998. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Blade from 1998, available to watch now on Hulu. For the basic plot summary of Blade, we follow Blade. Yes, that's the character's actual name. The movie's called Blade, and so is the character. Anyways, Blade, who is a half-human, half-vampire, vampire hunter, sets out to kill a ruthless vampire by the name of Deacon Frost, before Frost can summon an ancient blood god. Okay, so, a couple things in that sentence there that if you're not familiar with anything that I've described up until this point are causing you to scratch your head. You may be asking questions, and that's understandable, so let's go through them one at a time. First of all, Blade is half human, half vampire, and his name is Blade. Yes, he hunts vampires. Yes. And Deacon Frost is summoning a blood god. Yes. Okay, now that I've walked you through it, does it make any more sense? Well, let me explain it a little further and say that Blade is from Marvel comic books, so if that doesn't explain it, I don't know what will, and we're gonna move on and pretend like this is normal. Okay, cool. So, let's start with kind of the critiques of the movie itself. I find it interesting how iconic the music track from the opening scene of Blade itself is. It's just called Blade, and it's this very, very ravey techno music thing, and it's in like a clubhouse or nightclub. Not a clubhouse. Wow, we're not Mickey Mouse over here. In a nightclub. It takes place in a nightclub, and there's a bunch of vampires dancing with a bunch of lights flashing, and then they start pouring blood out of the fire hoses things at the top of the ceiling, whatever they're called, you know. And there's a lot of blood, and there's a lot of dancing vampires, and then Blade shows up, and he starts killing all the vampires, and it's like, okay. The reason I'm struggling to describe it is you really got to sit down and watch it. And once you watch it, you fully understand what kind of movie Blade is going to be. You fully understand what the tone is going to be. You understand the level of action you're going to be looking at. You're going to understand the attitude behind the main character. You're going to understand a lot of things real quick. And it doesn't really pull any punches in that department. I again find it interesting that the techno music that is used during that scene has become kind of an iconic thing outside of the movie, because inside of the movie, it fits the scene perfectly. And it again adds to that, oh darn, this is exactly what kind of movie I'm going to be watching for the next hour and 50 minutes. And you gotta kind of just be okay with that if you're gonna watch the rest of it. And thankfully, I was completely on board with it from the very beginning. What helped is the fact that during that opening scene, you start to realize pretty immediately, oh darn, the actor playing Blade is doing a phenomenal job at being a silent kick your butt type. And that is the genius of Wesley Snipes right there. I have been told before that Wesley Snipes was a perfect choice for the character of Blade. I don't have any familiarity with the character of Blade, but what I do know is that I can't imagine Wesley Snipes being replaced by anybody at this point. He is just the character. You don't even need to be familiar with the character to fully admit, yes, I like Wesley Snipes as Blade. I can't see him being replaced by anybody as Blade. I can't see that character being played by anybody else now. He embodies cool and kick your butt energy so perfectly and does not hesitate to wreck anybody's world in the process of the first Blade movie, that if he was replaced by anybody else, they just wouldn't have the same attitude. They wouldn't have the same gruff demeanor. They wouldn't have that same just exuding levels of 2000s cool, which is really funny to say out loud. Also, nobody would wear a big leather jacket as well as Wesley Snipes could do it. But point is, I say early 2000s energy. Again, that comes from that opening scene because it's very heavy with the flashing lights and the techno music. Keep in mind, this movie came out in 1998. So it kind of feels dated, but at the same time, it may have been considered ahead of its time. You could look at it from either perspective. And either way, it doesn't detract from the fact that the rest of the movie is going to follow that theme pretty heavily. It's going to feel like that for the rest of the time, especially when it comes to the editing. And that's kind of a detriment to the movie itself. I will also admit that when it comes to the performance of Wesley Snipes, it's almost a spoil type of a thing. No, I don't mean in spoilers for the plot. I mean spoiled as in you are spoiled by Wesley Snipes' performance, that it kind of makes you realize that the rest of the movie sucks, especially the main villain in that of Deacon Frost. I gotta be honest. Let's think here. What's his name? Stephen Dorff. Stephen Dorff does not do a good of a job as Wesley Snipes. He just doesn't. He doesn't match up in any way remotely to the level of just silent cool that Wesley Snipes embodies when he plays Blade. And part of the problem is that Deacon Frost just does not shut up. Ever. He does not shut up. That's really annoying in a villain character, let me tell you. And I'm the person who can't shut up, so if you've annoyed me, you've done something wrong. You get the point. I think one thing I want to close out with, before we go to break, I know this has been a bit scattershot, so let me kind of hone in on something very interesting about the first Blade. When I was going into it, I was kind of hoping that I'd walk away with an action movie that I could watch late at night when I want to turn my brain off and not really experience the world around me, just kind of like a distraction almost. That's something I always look for when I watch an action movie. Sometimes I'm just like done with school and I want to sit down and just watch a crazy action movie with a lot of over-the-top violence just to kind of tune out the world around me. And I will say, the original Blade achieves that pretty successfully. There are times where it feels like the combat does not have a lot of weight to it. Here I am describing it like it's a video game or something, but it's an action movie. Might as well use some video game terminology anyways. The point is that sometimes a lot of the punches or a lot of the, throwing a projectile, throwing like a shotgun to knock somebody off their feet, things like that, that's just a specific example. They don't have a lot of impact on the viewer. They feel a bit shallow and they feel kind of over the top and zany without a lot of good sound design to back it up. But in terms of choreography, the fight scenes are really engaging and interesting to watch because they use this weird rhythm that I've never truly seen in action movies before. The best way I'm going to describe it, as quickly as I possibly can before we go to break, is I'm going to tell you this. When Blade punches somebody, he decides to punch somebody, and then they are punched within 0.5 seconds of him deciding that. But you also see that 1 second where it looks like he's about to decide to punch somebody. When he actually throws a punch, it is like real quick. He does it super fast. And that goes for kicking, that goes for jabbing, that goes for any other action he does. When he does an action, it happens in a split second. When he's about to decide, it's almost a delay. And it's this really weird rhythm of almost a start and stop mentality to those punches and kicks. I almost said kickers. To those punches and kicks that I've never truly seen in an action hero before. And I weirdly actually enjoy seeing it. Again, most of that comes down to Wesley Snipes himself just exuding that level of energy to him. That it feels within character for him. So, there's that. I mean, interesting analysis on my end. I certainly wasn't expecting to walk away with that. And I certainly wasn't expecting to enjoy the second movie as much as I did. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will jump into Blade 2. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Blade 2 from 2002, available to watch now on Hulu. For the basic plot summary of Blade 2, we follow Blade, yet again, still played by Wesley Snipes, as he must confront a new threat in the form of a zombie-like plague infected upon the vampires, that being the Reapers. The Reapers are killing both humans and vampires, and in order to stop them, Blade must now team up with a group of 7 vampires who were trained specifically to kill Blade in order to go and kill the Reapers. Very interesting dynamics there. I wonder if there's going to be any problems among the group. No, don't worry about it. If there are, I'm not telling you because it's a spoiler, and I'm not lying. I'm just keeping the mystery alive. Have some fun with movies, guys. Come on. Suspend your disbelief for just a second. And also acknowledge the fact that, yes, it's kind of obvious that there's going to be problems if they were trained specifically to kill him. That's kind of expected. Anyways, let's jump into the movie itself, shall we? Let's get one big elephant out of the room right now. I am biased towards Blade 2 from the get-go because Blade 2, unlike the first Blade, which was directed by Stephen Norrington, is directed by the one and only Guillermo del Toro, the director of Pacific Rim and Hellboy and Pan's Labyrinth, and I love pronunciation of his name is very difficult for me, so I apologize. I am a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro. I love his movies, I love his style, I love him. He's amazing, he's a giant nerd, and because of that, knowing that he's making a comic book movie going into it, and him being such a big nerd in all the right ways, means I'm going to be so biased towards Blade 2 from the get-go. Just understand that. However, Blade 2, in its first 20 minutes, is significantly better than the first Blade in every single way. And I can say that without the bias towards Guillermo del Toro interfering with that understanding. Please allow me to elaborate. What makes it so much better? Well, let's start with the Reapers. The Reapers, the main leader, which unfortunately I just didn't have time to remember to write down. When I say that, I mean I didn't have time to remember to write that down. But keep in mind, the leader of the Reapers is established so much better than Deacon Frost in the first movie. Within the first 5 minutes, he's established as a threat in Blade 2. And that goes for kind of the rest of the other 15 minutes of the first part of Blade 2. Nearly everything is established better. I mean, Blade himself is established a lot better. His goal is established pretty immediately. His way of fighting is established pretty immediately. It's essentially the beauty of the first scene from the first Blade in that nightclub stretched out to 20 minutes. You can't complain when the first movie benefited greatly from its opening scene when the second movie just has a longer version of that scene in terms of establishment and characterization and getting to the point really effectively and does it better than the first movie, okay? You can't complain. You can't complain. You could, but I don't want to hear your complaints. This is me talking right now and I have no complaints, no notes. Moving on. I want to emphasize one portion of Blade 2 that I was really surprised by, and that is the visual effects department. I didn't really talk about it with the first Blade movie, but part of what made the first Blade kind of schlocky and made me understand, okay, it kind of sucks as a movie, is how dated the visual effects looked. Sure, it came out in 1998. If it had come out a couple years later, I still don't think it would have benefited from advancements in CGI technology. Let's just put it that way. Let's just put it nicely that way. I don't think it would have really improved all that greatly, and it definitely has not been helped by being 2 years behind anyways. So there's that. However, the visual effects in Blade 2, leagues better. And I again will chalk that up to it being up to Guillermo del Toro, although they did also hire the visual effects company started by Phil Tippett, who worked on, I believe it was one of the Star Wars movies and Jurassic Park. He also made the stop motion movie Mad God. He's a very big name in the visual effects industry, so that probably also had something to do with it. That collaboration, again, love it. That's part of the reason why it's so good. But when it comes to the visual effects, you've got the vampires disintegrating, looks a lot better than it did in the first movie. There are moments where they do these stunts where, you know, Blade is jumping out of a window and he survives the fall because he's half vampire and also magical. And even if he wasn't half vampire, he'd probably survive the fall out of sheer kick butt attitude. So let's just put it that way. When he's jumping out the window, they actually have like a 3D animated model that looks like Wesley Snipes doing that stunt. And when I tell you that the transition between that 3D model of Wesley Snipes and the actual actor of Wesley Snipes is seamless in every single instance it shows up, I want you to understand that is very, very rare to say when it comes to that kind of visual effect. Even Matrix Reloaded struggled with that kind of thing, doing that kind of thing with Neo. And the fact that Blade 2 pulls it off so successfully boggles my mind. It is mind-blowing to see. It is awesome. It looks really good. There is at least some other details I want to mention before we go to break, and that is when it comes to lighting, when it comes to set design, when it comes to a lot of other things surrounding the original Blade, they were kind of lackluster, and they were again adding to that feeling of it being sort of schlocky and not that great, but you could still enjoy it. With Blade 2, it just flips all the way around, where it's like, no, this is just good. This is just well-allocated budget to have these very bright red lights, these bright blue lights, these very expressive lighting choices, and these really cool sets in the background, and none of the sets are lit in a way that look bad. It's just this very wonderful, cohesive vision coming together to the point where it's just like, nah, this is just an enjoyable movie. I can't even be like, oh, it kind of sucks, but I can still enjoy it. Now, there's no but. It doesn't suck, and I can enjoy it. Look at that. And you want to know the most interesting point? I loved Wesley Snipes' performance in Blade so very much. Weirdly enough, you'd think with the movie itself being better than the first movie in terms of Blade 2, you'd think maybe Wesley Snipes' performance wouldn't shine through all that much. More so like he was holding up the first movie with his performance. No. Thankfully, no. What actually ends up happening is he ends up being even better than he was in Blade 1, and he was already pretty darn good in Blade 1. So that on top of it, wow, that's a huge improvement. And I already went on a rant about how much I love Wesley Snipes. Imagine him being better. It boggles the mind. I think what boggles my mind even more is to go from Blade 2 to Blade Trinity was such tonal whiplash in terms of quality that I'm still not sure how it happened. But we'll get into the specifics of what exactly happened after the break when we jump into Blade Trinity. So stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Blade Trinity from 2004, available to watch now on Hulu. For the basic plot summary of Blade Trinity, we follow Blade yet again, as he is forced to make a rush to the end, as the vampires have pulled out all the stops and are planning to unleash their ultimate plan upon the world. They have gone and awoken their most ancient member, their first incarnation, the first vampire ever. They have gone and awoken Dracula. Yeah, they just woke up Dracula. They walked into his house, knocked on the door. Wait, you can't knock on the door until if you walk into somebody's house, doesn't matter. And they're just like, hey, Drac, get up. I need you to kill Blade. And Dracula's like, okay. And you may have noticed that there was kind of a tone shift in how I was describing the plot there. That's because there's kind of a shift in Blade Trinity in comparison to Blade 2. Mainly that the shift is downward, and it goes downward in quality pretty significantly. So might as well match it in terms of the downward tone of me taking this seriously and actually giving this the time of day. Okay, let's just say it out loud and then go through the rest of the points. Blade Trinity sucks. It sucks. Not in the way that like the first movie sucked, where it was like endearing how much it kind of was schlocky and didn't have a lot of stiff competition to hold it up against Wesley Snipes' performance. Now, just overall, Blade Trinity just sucks. And I find it funny to say it that way because it's this weird, like, interesting way where I just get to say it that way because it's funny. But also, it's about vampires who tend to suck the blood out of their victims, so it works on double levels. Did I mention that Blade Trinity sucks yet? Did I mention that yet? I'm going to not mention it anymore, and we're going to move on to why. First off, the writing in Blade Trinity is awful. It is awkward. It is full of just these random awkward pauses where nobody's talking, and it's like, you don't want them to talk because every character in this movie is grating and annoying, but you kind of wish there was something to fill that empty void of space right there. You kind of wish there was like an extra line of dialogue just to like remove that awkward pause. But I don't really know which one would have been better. Kind of pick your poison situation. Doesn't really matter. It's going to suck either way. So, okay, that's that. Not to mention all the dialogue's really on the nose and not creative at all. It's just kind of generic and to the point. And like when it's not generic, it's just overly uncomfortable and stupid. When I say on the nose, I just mean like you can expect what it's going to say, what they're going to say, what jokes they're going to try and make. And I say jokes because the worst offender when it comes to badly written dialogue is the Ryan Reynolds character. Yes, Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel are both in this movie, and weirdly enough, I feel like they get more screen time than Blade. And yes, Ryan Reynolds is a wisecracking buffoon, and he has to make a bunch of jokes, and it's like, yeah, that works in Deadpool because the writing is good. When you have Ryan Reynolds just making jokes that aren't funny, it's not gonna suddenly magically be funny because it's Ryan Reynolds. I think you should have understood that going in. Now, granted, it's 2004, long before Deadpool ever came out. But I mean, principle still applies. You gotta understand, it's not funny to just have Ryan Reynolds say things. He needs to have actual jokes. He needs to embody the character he's playing. And I don't even care to remember what his name was. I think it was King. If it wasn't that, then I apologize, but I could not be bothered to write down the character's name. So there's that. It's also just, there's a couple moments where I was fully convinced that the script had grammar errors, and they just had the actors read it out loud. There were points where I was like, did Wesley Snipes just give up and read that? Did he just read it as it was written without really asking about the grammar at all? Okay, fine, I'll go with it. It's not like anything else is really benefiting this movie in any possible way. Let's move on to the other things that are not benefiting it. When I bring up Wesley Snipes, let's cover the acting, shall we? Well, unlike the other two movies, where in the first Blade, Wesley Snipes saves the movie from being too bad to not enjoy, and from Blade 2, where he actually elevates the movie when it's better, we now have Blade Trinity, the worst scenario possible, where he has given up completely, not even in a funny way, not in a way that I can enjoy, where it's kind of this cynical sort of actor thing where you can tell they don't want to be there. It's more like a, I really don't want to be here type of a thing. And it's like, oh, you're not having fun with it. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to have fun with it either. Okay, Wesley Snipes, you've given up. That's fine. And that, in comparison to all the other acting performances, is somehow still the best one, because everybody else, it feels like they're not even trying. Or if they are trying, it's just that they're not very good at acting. I'll be honest, it's just like they're not very good at acting. I already kind of brought up Ryan Reynolds, but some of the like minor characters even, especially the actor playing Dracula, it's like, wow, you're not intimidating at all. And I thought Deacon Frost was bad. You're a next level, man. Congratulations, I guess. Let's talk about some other things with this movie. First off, up next on the long laundry list of bad things, editing. I could feel every single cut made in this movie. And that's called bad editing. Not like the other two movies had exceptional editing, but I mean, Blade 2 was the best it got, and that suffered from the problem of cutting to 4 different angles when it wasn't needed. But this movie, it's just kind of like, oh, that's how you're going to edit that, huh? Okay. It's certainly the worst edited out of the 3, that's for sure. When it comes to the music, it's bland. And that's coming off of Blade, which had like an amazing opening song with this pounding techno music to benefit the scene. All of the music in this movie just feels so bland and forgettable. Let's talk about the CGI. The CGI can kind of be ugly at times. I mention it only because I went off on a rant on Blade 2 and I had to bring up the CGI. Let's talk about the cinematography. Is the cinematography bad like the rest of the movie? No. What? I could tell that they got like a very expensive looking camera for 2002 and a pretty decent one at that to film this movie on. And the cinematography at times is actually well moving. What on earth is happening? Huh? You're telling me the cinematography is actually pretty decent? That's weird. You know what isn't weird? The fact that because the music sucks and is kind of flat and uninteresting, the sound design is also pretty flat and uninteresting. And you know what that means? You know what that means, dear listeners? That means that Blade Trinity is a perfect example of the core filmmaking concept that a good sound design soundscape can benefit bad cinematography. You can have bad cinematography, but great sound design, and nobody's gonna notice. But if you have bad sound design and great cinematography, everybody's gonna notice, and it's not gonna work. The bad sound design is not gonna be able to rest on the shoulders of the good cinematography. The bad cinematography can completely rest on the shoulders of the good sound design. But in the other case, This is a nearly 2-hour movie where it is a perfect example of that principle, need I remind you. So it's kind of painful to sit through, if you can imagine. I think what I want to wrap up with here is, I know I've been negative during my review of Blade Trinity. So I will leave you with this. Blade Trinity is far from the worst movie I've ever seen. I've seen much worse movies than this. If anything, it's a 2 out of 10, which I know sounds pretty low, but I've seen worse. It is nowhere near the worst movie. If anything, a part of me, some morbid part of me, wants to recommend this movie to people who enjoy the first 2 Blade movies on the sheer basis of just watch the first 10 minutes to be fascinated by how bad they did with this movie. just the first 10 minutes. You will be fascinated by it. Of course, don't watch the rest of it, because then you'll be suffering like I was. That's my recommendation. That's my final thoughts on Blade Trinity. And with that, we come to the end of What to Watch Wednesdays this week. Thank you all for listening in. I will be back next Wednesday for another episode of What to Watch Wednesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg. Please be sure to follow along with What to Watch Wednesdays at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, on both Instagram and YouTube. And when it comes to Instagram, you will be able to check on the status of the Saturday, or more so weekend show called What to Watch Weekends that I host here on 88.1 The Burg. I hesitate to say when it'll be happening this weekend or if it will be happening this weekend because I just don't know yet. We're kind of in a state of flux and there's a football game this weekend, so no way to fully guarantee it right now, but be sure to follow along on the Instagram page if you're interested, and I will be posting an update on when it'll be happening there. With all that being said, thanks again for listening in. I'll be back next Wednesday telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.